My name is Ava Carter. I'm 36 years old, a retired Army general, survivor of 3 combat zones, and, for most of my family, an inconvenient reminder of everything they chose to forget. The last photo I ever took with my sister still sits on my desk. I'm in uniform, boots dusty, holding Emma in my arms while she giggles like the world was simple. That day, she called me her hero. Back then, I believed her. Now, she's the one on national television, smiling under lights I paid for, telling the world about a donation I made, under her name, $72,000. My final deployment bonus, meant for veteran housing, wired silently, credited publicly, to Emma. I never asked for applause, but I never expected theft either. So when I stepped into Lincoln Hall, invitation or not, it wasn't to reclaim the spotlight. It was to reclaim the truth. Because silence might feel like grace, but left unchecked, it becomes erasure. And I have no interest in being erased. Not anymore. The frame had faded at the edges, the glass chipped in the top corner from years of being packed and unpacked between deployments. But her laugh? I could still hear it. Sharp, unfiltered joy. Back when love was simple, before it came with terms and expiration dates. Now, that photo just reminded me I was real. Proof that I had once mattered to them. Rain clawed at the window like it wanted in. North Carolina winters had that kind of desperation. Wet, bone deep, always hanging in the air like something unspoken. My duffel bag lay half-zipped on the couch, boots on the floor still crusted with Afghan dust, and the TV muttered in the background about politics and philanthropy like it always did. Then I heard her name. Emma Carter, lead donor and keynote speaker for this year's donor recognition ceremony in Washington, D.C. I turned. The screen showed her standing at a podium, chin high, smile polished. The caption beneath her name read, Founder, Carter Community Fund, supporting veterans' reintegration initiatives. My hand tightened around the coffee mug. Ceramic creaked. I hadn't spoken to Emma in almost a year. I didn't even know she was in D.C. again, much less speaking on behalf of veterans. Veterans like me. The news anchor continued. Miss Carter's generous donation of $72,000 helped launch the new housing pilot in Southeast D.C., with special thanks to her family. I shut it off. Silence exploded in the room. That number. $72,000. It wasn't just familiar. It was mine. I crossed the room, opened the folder from the base admin office, and flipped to my last discharge summary. Stapled to it, a bank transaction summary sat in plain type. 72,000 USD, wire transfer. Authorized, Ava M. Carter. It was dated 4 months ago, my final deployment stipend and hazard pay bonus. I'd chosen to donate it anonymously, setting up a silent fund for transitional housing, a place for soldiers who had nowhere else to land. I never told anyone, certainly not Emma. So how the hell was she standing on stage, soaking up the spotlight for it? A knock rattled the door. It was Corporal Jameson, the assistant lieutenant, dropping off my final clearance documents. I signed them in silence, barely hearing his polite farewell. Once the door shut again, I walked back to the desk and stared at the folder. Then I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the one thing I never meant to use, the unsigned invitation. It was addressed to Ms. Ava Carter. A formality. No RSVP requested. No contact name. Nothing personal. Just a date, time, and location. Lincoln Hall. Saturday, 6 p.m. They hadn't sent it. I found it buried in a public email loop by mistake, forwarded by a clerk who thought I was already in D.C. The message had no warmth, no welcome, just logistics, like they wanted to be able to say I could have come, while ensuring I wouldn't. I picked up the photo again. Emma couldn't have been more than 10, That day, she'd tied my dog tags around her own neck and saluted like she knew what it meant. I wish I could forget that version of her. But now she was the woman smiling on national television, basking in the praise I bled to earn. I booked the ticket right then. One way, Washington, D.C. Not to be honored, to watch them lie to my face. I scrolled the event's official website for the 5th time that morning. No mention of me. No archived sponsorship record. No Ava Carter listed under past donors, honorees, or even attendees. It was like I never existed. Each pixel of that page mocked me. The banner read, "Recognizing those who build the bridge back home." Underneath, a slow carousel of polished faces faded in and out, Emma's front and center. One photo had her placing a folded flag on a podium. The caption beneath read, "From a grateful citizen to our nation's heroes." My hand twitched. She didn't even flinch taking credit for something she didn't earn. I guess that was a family tradition. Like how 3 years ago, I paid off Dad's medical bills quietly, thinking I was preserving some dignity for him. I didn't sign the check, didn't ask for a thank you. Now I saw the mistake. Silence wasn't grace, it was erasure. I pushed open the door to a Capitol Hill coffee shop, the kind where baristas wore pressed shirts and charged extra for decaf. Ashby was already at the corner table, hunched over a laptop, black glasses slipping down his nose. He hadn't changed much. Still lean, still skeptical, still chewing pens like they were cigarettes. 2 shots of regret and a side of betrayal, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Ashby glanced up, smirked. "Ava Carter, I thought you went ghost." "I did. But now I'm haunting." He leaned back, arms crossed. "So what's the occasion?" "I'm curious," I said, keeping my tone casual. "About the donor ceremony. Emma Carter's the keynote?" Ashby studied me for a beat too long. "Yeah, big deal. PR machine's been working overtime. You know her?" I didn't blink. "Family adjacent." He snorted. "Figures." I watched his fingers tap keys, the screen reflecting in his lenses. "You got a guest list? You planning to crash?" "Just curious." Ashby hesitated, then turned the screen. A spreadsheet glowed under the cafe's dim light. I skimmed rows and rows of donors, press, staff. Emma Carter was listed 3 times as sponsor, speaker, and strategic consultant. No Ava Carter. "Guess I didn't make the cut," I said flatly. Ashby frowned. "You're not related? We used to share a house, sometimes blood." He leaned in, whispering now. "There was a weird change back in March. PR got a memo saying the original sponsor file needed streamlining. Came from a Susan Carter." "That your mother?" "Was," I said. "She prefers people forget." He closed the laptop. "There's more. They're filming a promo today. You know, those black and white segments they play before the speeches. Emma's reenacting the handoff. Says she wants it emotionally authentic." I sat back. So not only had they stolen the money, but now they were inventing a whole damn narrative around it. Their narrative. "How do you even reenact something that never happened?" I muttered. Ashby shrugged. "Doesn't have to be real. Just persuasive." We both knew what that meant. PR didn't need truth. It needed story. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight settle where it needed to. "Ashby." He looked up. "Don't delete your raw footage." He blinked. "Why?" I held his gaze. "I may need it sooner than you think." The front door still creaked like it used to. But this time, I wasn't welcome. It had been 8 years since I last stepped onto this porch, but muscle memory still guided my hand to the brass knocker. Still shaped like a lion's head, though polished now, as if time had tried to scrub away what was buried underneath. The door opened before I could knock. "Ava." My mother's voice was flat, not shocked, Not relieved, just disappointed. Like I'd shown up late to a dinner I was never invited to. "Hi, Mom." She didn't answer, just turned and walked in, leaving the door open behind her. The hallway smelled different. No hint of the jasmine diffuser I remembered. Instead, it smelled like fresh paint and chemical lemon polish, cold floors, white walls, framed art instead of family photos. The staircase had been redone. Sleek wood, new railing, everything sharp and staged. They'd gutted the house, scrubbed out every memory. In the kitchen, I found her at the marble island, already pouring tea. Emma was there too, perched on a stool like she owned the place, which, I suppose, she might have believed she did. "Nice of you to visit," Emma said lightly. "We were just talking about the event. It's overwhelming, really. I'm sure." I sat across from her, kept my coat on. I noticed my name's not anywhere in the program. Emma tilted her head. "Was it supposed to be?" Susan set down a cup in front of me. Earl Grey. No sugar, no milk. Just the way I hated it. She hadn't forgotten. She just didn't care. "You were gone so long," she said. "Eventually, people stop asking where you went." "I didn't vanish," I said. "I was serving." "Exactly," she said, stirring her tea slowly. "You left. You became someone else. That uniform made you a stranger." That landed with a quiet thud. I remembered the letter, the one she sent after my third deployment, back when Emma was finishing her master's and I was dragging bodies out of wrecked convoys. "Families don't kill people, Ava," she wrote, "but war does." It was her way of severing the cord, guilt masked as righteousness. I turned to Emma. "Did you know the $72,000 you donated came from me?" She blinked. "What?" "Don't," I said. "You reenacted the check handoff for your little video, so I'll ask again. Did you know that money wasn't yours?" Her lips tightened, but her voice stayed syrupy. "I think there's been some misunderstanding. Mom said it was part of the family trust." Susan cut in. "We consolidated some accounts after your discharge. You didn't leave forwarding instructions." "I left instructions with the Department of Veterans Affairs. The wire was made under my name." I pulled the folded document from my coat pocket and laid it on the marble. "Here. Proof." Emma leaned over and scanned it. Her smile flickered. Not gone, just rearranged. Controlled. Susan didn't even touch it. "You should have said something earlier," Emma said carefully. "Now it's already processed. It's already on record." "Your record," I said. Emma looked up and smiled faintly. Her voice was almost a whisper, but it carried across the kitchen like a knife being drawn. "And yet, your name is nowhere. Maybe that's what you deserve." "You want a war, Emma?" I whispered, staring at the wall of screens. "Then I'll play it by the book. And the book has rules." Ashby's office was a cave of organized chaos. Stacks of hard drives, boxes of marked tapes, framed clippings, old film awards. A battered coffee mug read, "Truth ages well." The faint buzz of editing software pulsed in the background like a quiet heartbeat. She sat at her desk in sweats, hair pulled up with a pen, hunched over a screen playing clips from the ceremony prep shoot. Her assistant, Morgan, maybe 22, earbuds perpetually hanging from her hoodie collar, was logging footage nearby. I walked in without knocking. Ashby didn't flinch. "Rough day?" she asked. "Educational?" I said. "Can I see the raw promo footage?" She arched an eyebrow. "Any particular reason?" I gave her a look. Ashby didn't press. She swiveled her monitor and hit play. The screen showed the grand ballroom in soft focus. Gold drapes. Veterans seated at round tables. Emma stood under a banner, honoring those who served. I watched her rehearse the same line, again and again. I'm honored to support our veterans. I'm honored to support our veterans. Each take sounded more polished, less real. Her blazer too crisp, her hands practiced in their gestures. Then came a take where she laughed between lines and turned to someone off camera. She asked us to remove that one, Morgan said quietly. Why? I asked. Morgan glanced at Ashby, then shrugged. Said it looked too soft, and that it showed too much of the uniform. Whatever that meant. I froze. Uniform? She meant the soldier, Morgan clarified. She pointed to a woman in the background, real veteran, I think, said it cast a shadow. Her words? Not mine. Ashby narrowed her eyes. I remember that. I thought she meant the lighting. Morgan opened a file directory on a side screen, clicked through folders until a time-stamped label read, March 14th, Alt Takes, Sponsor Close-Ups. She clicked play. The screen showed Emma off to the side, sipping from a water bottle between takes. She was mid-conversation, mic still live. Look, Emma said to someone off-frame, that soldier woman? She's just a donor. Not family. I didn't move. The sentence sat in the air like acid. Morgan paused it. You want me to label that clip? I nodded once. She typed silently. Renamed the file. Final proof. My throat tightened. I wasn't surprised. Just settled. That sentence was everything wrapped in one insult. That soldier woman. Not Ava. Not daughter. Just a stranger with a checkbook. Disposable. Ashby looked at me. You okay? I'm fine, I said. I was trained to listen before I act. Morgan leaned forward. Is this for, like, legal stuff? I met her eyes. It's for truth. She clicked save, and the file disappeared into a folder labeled internal, hold. Anything else? Ashby asked. Not yet, I said, standing, but keep the cameras rolling. The story's just getting good. You still carry her photo? Ashby whispered, barely audible in the dim hotel light. I do, I said, fingers tracing the edges of the old image, because I remember the girl, not the woman she became. The room was a shoebox, chipped paint, a humming heater, the faint scent of stale carpet. Budget wasn't the word, but it gave me silence. A desk with uneven legs, a drawer where I'd stacked every piece of the past I could salvage. Photos, letters, press clippings, snapshots of a life that had been edited out. Ashby sat cross-legged on the bed, reviewing the guest list again on her laptop. She looked at me every few minutes, unsure if she was intruding, unsure if I wanted her there. I didn't say much. I laid out the photo Emma had drawn at age 6. Crayon strokes, jagged stars, me in a blue NASA suit with a US flag on my arm. My sister flies higher than everyone. It was signed in shaky handwriting. I had laminated it. The edges were frayed from moving, from folding and unfolding, like a prayer. Next to it, a freshly mailed envelope rested on top of a newspaper clipping. The hospital logo was faintly embossed. Dear Miss Lawrence, it began, we wanted to personally thank you for your generous support in 2021, which enabled the treatment of Mr. Douglas Lawrence. As per your request, the donation was listed as anonymous. I skipped the rest. I had memorized it already. Underneath, folded and yellowing, was the letter Dad had written me before his surgery. If your mother doesn't see you, the uniform will, and I always will. His handwriting had slanted more than usual, weakness showing through the ink. I remembered how my mother never even brought the letter to the hospital. He gave it to a nurse, and the nurse mailed it. That's how much distance they'd already put between us. Ashby looked up. They took everything, Ava, but they can't take your integrity. That's more than their last name ever gave them. I didn't answer. A few minutes passed. The hum of the heater filled the room like breath. If they apologize, she said finally, would you forgive them? I looked at her. not with anger, just the steady weight of clarity. It's not about forgiveness. It's about truth being seen, once and for all. Her eyes didn't move. I stood, crossed the room, pulled my jacket off the hook, slipped my hand into the inside pocket. Out came a small black square, smooth, thin, silent. A live stream relay transmitter, encrypted, built for fieldwork. I had kept it all these years, not for a mission, but in case I ever needed to speak without being interrupted, without being erased. Ashby's eyes widened just slightly. "You're going live?" she asked. "Not now," I said. "But soon. Let's see how brave they really are when the world's watching." She didn't smile, didn't object, just nodded. Once. I slipped the device back into the lining of my coat. The old picture Emma drew still sat on the desk. In that world, she believed in me. In that world, I was more than disposable. And that world deserved to be remembered. Emma's charity wasn't hers. It was a mosaic of stolen efforts. And I had the tiles. I stood in the narrow archive room of the Capital Outreach Foundation, pretending to be a volunteer sorting through donor acknowledgments. My fingers were cold, not from the temperature, but from the weight of what I was chasing. Paper cuts burned like little accusations as I flipped through file after file, my eyes hunting for anomalies. The smell of old paper and toner ink clung to me like dust. Ashby had once said, "To destroy a lie, follow the money." So I did. On the second shelf from the bottom, tucked inside a box labeled 2022 MISC. Correspondence, I found it. A printed email from the foundation's treasurer. The subject line read, "Donation Attribution Change, March 2022. I unfolded it, and my pulse hitched. "We've received a request to amend the sponsor credit for the $72,000 grant from A.V. Carter to Emma Carter. Please confirm authorization." There was no signature from me. There was only a forwarded approval from a familiar Gmail address, my mother's. I stared at the page. It wasn't just a mistake. It was an orchestrated edit, a deliberate whiteout of my name. Not even a thank you, not even a heads up. Just an administrative sleight of hand. The archivist, Melanie, hovered nearby. She was young, maybe early 30s, with reading glasses and a watchful stare. I could feel her assessing me, wondering why I kept pulling files that didn't belong to the assigned box. "You looking for something specific?" she asked casually. "Just double-checking some donor history for the committee's visuals," I replied. "Making sure everything lines up." She nodded, unconvinced. "Need a copier?" I hesitated, then pulled out the sheet with the email. "Actually, would you mind printing me a hard copy of this one?" Melanie squinted at the page. "It's from 2 years ago." "I know. Just trying to clean up attribution chains." She looked at me for a second longer than was polite. Then, without a word, she walked toward the staff copier, slid the page in, and hit print. When she handed it back, she didn't ask questions. But the look in her eyes had shifted, from suspicion to a faint curiosity. I kept digging. 2 hours later, I had 4 more grant records flagged with similar patterns, all listed under anonymous donor initially, only to be publicly credited later to Emma Carter in press releases and event brochures. Each one was substantial. $15,000 to a food relief program, $30,000 to a veterans trauma center, $8,000 to a children's learning initiative, and another $40,000 to a shelter for women. And each one tied back to accounts I had contributed to, either directly or through private connections I'd built during my military tours, contacts who trusted my word and donated because I vouched for the cause. Emma had taken those seeds and planted her name on the harvest. It wasn't just one theft. It was a system, a pattern. I opened my phone and snapped pictures of the most critical pages, just enough to establish the paper trail without alerting anyone. Then I carefully returned the originals where they belonged. Outside, the sky had turned gunmetal gray. Rain hung in the air like a threat. I stood beneath the awning and opened my messages. 2. Ashby. She's made a habit out of theft. Ready to film her next performance? I hit send. Some lies collapse when challenged. Others need to be dragged out screaming into the light. And I was done being quiet. General Ava Carter? The officer said, saluting me in the Capitol corridor. We've met. I turned toward the voice and saw her. Colonel Monroe, now wearing a sleek gray suit instead of the dusty fatigues I remembered from Kandahar. Her eyes hadn't changed, though. Clear, steady, unreadable. I suppose some faces don't forget, I said, returning the salute out of habit before lowering my hand. Though I'm technically retired now. Her brow lifted. Funny, that uniform left an impression. She stepped closer, eyes briefly scanning the ID badge on my jacket. Civilian guest. No rank, no credentials. Just a barcode and the printed word, visitor. We stood in the hushed side corridor of the Capitol, carpet muffling our steps, portraits of dead senators lining the walls. Outside, brass instruments from the honor guard warmed up in distant echoes. My breath caught when I saw one of the large posters leaning against a cart. Emma's face, airbrushed and smiling, with the title, Honor Through Generosity. I turned away. What brings you back here? Monroe asked. I kept my tone light. Just observing the ceremony, supporting from the sidelines. She studied me a little longer. Funny. Your name's not on any official attendee list, which is strange for someone who's given as much as you have. I met her gaze. Must be a mistake. Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Mistakes like that usually have intent behind them. Silence settled between us. The Capitol air always smelled faintly of disinfectant and power. Monroe stepped closer, lowering her voice. You know, Emma Carter requested something unusual, she said, that no uniformed family members be invited to the main stage, claimed it would detract from civilian sponsorship focus. My pulse slowed to a dangerous calm. Interesting, I said. Very specific. I found it odd, she continued, but the request was approved. Political pressure, apparently. I glanced toward the rotunda, where staffers and officers moved like shadows in dress blues and tailored blazers. Then I looked at Monroe again. I won't make a scene, I said. I'm not here to start anything. She nodded. I know. That's not who you are. She slipped a small envelope from her blazer and pressed it into my hand. Inside was a guest pass. Gold-trimmed. No name. Just a barcode. You didn't get it from me, she said. I was never here, I replied. Monroe hesitated, then leaned in slightly. There's a difference between silence and erasure, Ava. One you choose, the other's forced on you. I held her gaze. Trust me, I know. Ashby appeared from the elevator just then, his phone buzzing in one hand, eyes darting from Monroe to me. You good? I nodded. Better than I've been in a long time. As Monroe turned to leave, I called after her. Colonel. She glanced back. I stepped forward, just enough that my voice would carry to only her. Let's just say, Emma may regret that request. This time, Monroe did smile, just barely. Then she vanished into the polished marble corridors, her heels clicking like distant warnings. I held the pass in my hand, its weight heavier than it looked. Not because it granted access, but because it meant someone still saw me. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was a foot inside the walls where they'd tried to write me out. And I was ready. They planned the perfect script. So I planned the interruption. Back in my hotel room, the laminated event map lay unfolded across the bed, its sharp folds like scars running across enemy territory. I'd memorized every corridor, every access point, every angle where a camera could hide. Their show would be smooth, polished, and fake. Mine would be real, raw, and irreversible. Morgan sat cross-legged on the floor, his gear bag open. He was calibrating the micro-broadcast device, small enough to fit under a brooch or inside a necklace clasp. This thing can sync directly with the backup server. If the live feed goes down, the backup goes up, he said, not looking up. Ashby leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, skeptical as ever. We only get one chance at this. If she catches on, it's not just her reputation that'll burn. She's built her entire persona on stolen generosity, I muttered, adjusting the timecode overlays on my tablet. I'm just lighting a match under the mask. Earlier that afternoon, Morgan had posed as a young media intern assigned to Emma's pre-event interview. I'd written the pitch myself, highlighting the sponsor's perspective. Heartfelt, humble, human. It worked. Emma invited him to her suite for a 10-minute on-camera prep. While adjusting her mic, Morgan had clipped the pin-sized device to the back lining of her blazer. It would stream audio to both my laptop and a secure cloud, no matter what. Here's the full timeline, I said, pointing to the schedule on my screen. Emma gives the welcome speech at 9 a.m. sharp. If she follows the script, she'll tell the story about how she stepped up to sponsor the Veteran Scholarship Program after my deployment. That's the lie. Ashby frowned. And if she improvises? I tapped the side of my tablet. Plan B kicks in. We loop the footage from her promo interview, where she said I was just a donor in uniform, not family. Morgan backed it up to an auto trigger. Any deviation in the mic feed? The backup server kicks in. Morgan looked up. We're not just exposing her. We're wrecking her, Ava. I didn't answer right away. I opened the velvet case that held my father's dog tags. Another piece of quiet memory I wasn't ready to display, but refused to bury. Then I looked up. She chose the path, I said, my voice low. I'm just holding up a mirror. The room fell quiet. Rain began tapping against the window like it had that night back in Fort Liberty. Only this time, I wasn't packing bags. I was loading proof. I wasn't looking for approval. I was looking for exposure. As we wrapped the setup, Ashby handed me a plain black folder. All files backed up here too, just in case. Don't trust the cloud? Trust paper. I slipped the folder into my inside coat pocket and zipped it shut. Tomorrow, the world hears what I've heard for years. Not whispers, not rumors, facts. Ashby gave a slight nod. I'll be near the sound booth. If something goes wrong, it won't, I cut in. Because everything they built rests on a lie, and lies don't hold under pressure. Morgan double-checked the remote. Signal is live. Everything's in place. I stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker as if DC itself were holding its breath. Let them rehearse. Let them polish the surface. I was done being silent. Tomorrow, the silence would break. Emma stepped onto the stage for rehearsal, and I watched, unseen, from the control room. The auditorium was dim except for the halo of warm lights circling the stage. From the second-floor director's booth, I had a perfect view through the one-way glass. No one could see me. Not the technicians tweaking the LED backdrop, not the assistants pacing along the curtain line, and certainly not Emma. She wore a tailored navy dress and low heels, microphone already clipped, earpiece in place. Her posture was poised, chin slightly lifted, the picture of grace under pressure. But I could tell she was rehearsing more than a speech. She was rehearsing a legacy that didn't belong to her. Morgan stood near the audio console, pretending to take notes for the AV team. He glanced toward the glass just once, our silent signal that everything was recording. Let's do a dry run from the top, the technical director said, voice crackling through the speakers overhead. Emma took her mark at the podium and smiled at the empty chairs. Good morning, everyone. I'm deeply honored to speak today as someone who has always believed in the power of service. I leaned forward, heart steady. She continued, each word scripted like a song she'd memorized long ago. My sister was the first in our family to join the military. She taught me what sacrifice looked like. She gave without asking for applause. And when I had the chance to give back, to fulfill her vision, I did so proudly. Pause. Sincere expression, tilted head. I'm proud to continue my sister's dream through this program and for every veteran who still needs a voice. A chill pressed into the base of my neck. That line, my sister's dream, sounded noble, even loving, except it was theft. And then, right on cue, the director raised a hand. Emma, quick note, he said through the mic. Marketing team thinks sister is too personal. Some of the press don't know her story. Can we change that to my late veteran relative? It's broader, cleaner. Emma didn't hesitate. Sure, that works. No flinch, no protest. Not even a pause to acknowledge the shift from personal to ambiguous, from me to no one. I turned to the soundboard and touched the dial Morgan had labeled FX, rehearsal layer. It was rigged to loop 3 seconds of Emma's voice from her earlier promo. That soldier woman? She's just a donor, not family. I tapped play once. The system added just enough distortion to blend into the frequency, turning it into a ghost of static through the stage speakers. A buzz cracked through the air for less than a breath. Emma froze. The tech crew looked up. Someone adjusted a cable. A light blinked red, then green. Emma blinked at the podium. Did someone just hear that voice? The director waved it off. Probably feedback from Channel 3. We'll patch it. But I saw it. The flicker in her eyes. The awareness that something didn't sit right. That maybe the ghost she'd tried to bury still had a pulse. She cleared her throat and smiled again. Let's run it from the beginning. In that moment, watching her stand tall under the lights she'd stolen, I felt something shift. Not rage, not pain. Precision. Because it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been erased from their own story, and I was done being a ghost. At 7:59 p.m., everything was in place. At 8 o'clock, the truth would no longer wait. I stood in the narrow backstage corridor, half lit by the buzzing emergency strip lights. The thick velvet curtains on my left rustled faintly with the air conditioning, like they too were holding their breath. From the front of the stage, the low hum of the audience settling into their seats bled through the walls. Murmurs, camera shutters, the occasional throat clearing from the MC preparing his opening lines. Ashby handed me a final checklist, scribbled in shorthand. Morgan. Mike confirmed. Backup video, armed. Signal trigger, linked. Monroe. In position. Across from us, Monroe adjusted her sleeve, the polished insignia on her uniform catching a glint of spotlight. She had always been composed, even in live fire drills back at base, but now there was something sharper in her gaze. She knew this wasn't war. It was theater. With stakes no bullet could touch. I need another exit, I said quietly, not breaking eye contact. Monroe blinked. Expecting trouble? Expecting interruption. If the stream cuts mid-speech, I'll need a second signal from outside. She didn't ask for justification. She simply nodded and turned to the wall panel, keying in a code. A green light blinked as the side door unlocked. Behind us, Ashby was already setting up the faux interview with the government guest of honor. Her press badge, fake but flawless, hung low around her neck. She waved a tiny mic under the guise of ambient interview ambiance. The mic had a split function, one line to her cam, the other directly to our private relay server. 2 birds, 1 wire. Everything was synced. Everything. Except the reaction. A scuffle broke out at the other end of the hallway. Susan. She wasn't dressed like a grieving mother or a proud veteran's widow. She wore status. Pearl earrings, champagne blouse, her mouth drawn tight. Beside her, Emma whispered something sharply, then spotted me. Her posture stiffened, and Susan marched straight toward Monroe. "She doesn't belong here," Susan snapped, pointing at me like I was an intruder in my own shadow. "She's not on the official list. She's been disruptive all weekend." Monroe didn't flinch. "She's General Carter," she said, her voice low and firm. "She goes wherever truth needs a witness." For a breath, the hallway fell silent. Susan's lips parted, perhaps to argue, but Monroe had already turned her back. The guard at the corridor door stepped aside without a word. I nodded once. "Thank you." Monroe didn't smile. She didn't need to. Truth didn't ask for permission. The stage manager whispered over the headset, 60 seconds. Ashby gave a final tap to her watch, syncing with Morgan. "The device on Emma's collar is active. Signal is clean." I tucked the audio file drive deeper into the lining of my blazer. If everything failed, I'd hand it to the guest of honor myself. Let the state hear it before the press. Susan and Emma disappeared into the waiting lounge behind the stage. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Please welcome tonight's honored sponsor, a community leader, and dedicated advocate for veterans, Emma Carter." The crowd began clapping. But as Emma reached for the podium, a side door clicked open to the left of the stage, and I stepped into the light. Not invited, not expected, but no longer invisible. The lights dimmed, the applause rose, and I walked straight into the lie. Emma had just reached the center of the stage, both hands resting lightly on the polished wood of the podium. A spotlight bloomed overhead, capturing her in soft gold as the room faded around her. She wore the smile of someone ready to be immortalized. "This award," she began, voice calm and syrupy, "is for every veteran whose sacrifice deserves—" "I'm sorry," I said, stepping into the beam of light. "But before you finish—" A murmur rose like a wave through the audience. Emma froze mid-sentence, her eyes locked onto mine. For a second, confusion danced across her features, until recognition sharpened them into fear. I took 2 more steps toward the front of the stage. My boots echoed against the lacquered floor. I turned toward the crowd and raised my hand in a crisp, deliberate salute. "General Ava Carter, U.S. Army." Retired. Silence. Even the stage lights seemed to hesitate. In the first row, a senator sat forward. Cameras whirred louder now, like insects sensing heat. Monroe stood in the aisle, motionless, and behind her, Susan had gone visibly pale. Emma spoke again, voice faltering. We weren't scheduled for—" "I know," I said, lowering my hand. "That's the point." I turned back to the audience, scanning their stunned faces, letting my voice find its weight. Not raised, not trembling, just clear. For over a decade, I served this country under oath, in silence, in shadows. I gave without asking to be seen, but someone else decided to be seen in my place. I took a breath, then delivered the line I had carried in my chest like a final bullet. "Before she finishes, may I ask, how does it feel to speak on a foundation you never built?" Gasps. Audible. Real. On the projection screen behind us, the live stream caught my face. Sharp, centered, composed. A beat later, the camera cut to Emma. She looked stunned, off script. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She blinked fast, as if that alone could erase me. I continued, just enough to hold the room. She used my name, my donations, my service. Then she erased every mention, until even my uniform became a threat to her script. "That's not true," Emma whispered, but the mic didn't catch it. Only I heard. I stepped back, leaving the center open, my voice still steady. I don't want her spotlight. I want the truth to be seen. From the corner of my eye, I saw Monroe nod once. Morgan signaled. The live stream was secured. Behind me, the projector screen flickered once, just enough static to make the crowd lean forward. It had begun. She tried to shut it down. Too late. The feed was everywhere. Emma's hand darted toward the podium mic like a reflex, her fingers curling around its slender neck as if silence could erase reality. Her lips moved, something between panic and protest, but even before her words formed, the projector screen behind us flickered to life. First, a blurry preview frame, then color and sound. "Is this live?" someone whispered from the audience. The audio was crystal clear. A voice, Emma's, echoed through the room, confident, careless. "That soldier woman? She's just a mechanic in uniform, not even that talented." The room recoiled in collective breath. No, no, that's taken out of... Emma turned, voice rising, but the video didn't wait. Cut to the next clip, a behind-the-scenes rehearsal. Emma, in casual makeup and designer heels, sipping coffee. "She built it with her hands," she said, smirking, "but I'll win it with my face." The sound didn't explode, it imploded. Even those who didn't know me now knew her. I stood at the side of the stage, letting the footage speak. I didn't move, I didn't gloat. I had promised myself I wouldn't. And yet, something inside me quietly exhaled. Next slide, 2 sponsorship documents, side by side. One showed A.V. Carter, donor of record. The other, filed 3 months later, replaced it with E. Carter. The header read, "Sponsorship Swap Log, 2021 to 2023. Ashby had formatted it like a forensic exhibit. Bullet points, timestamps, staff signatures. No room for doubt. From the back of the hall, Susan tried to wave down the technical booth. "Cut the feed," she hissed. "Stop that screen." But Monroe was already there, hand calmly resting on the console. "Too many witnesses now," she said flatly, not looking at Susan. "Even the truth has security clearance." Across the room, journalists rose from their chairs. Phones lit up. Hashtags formed in real time. A trending storm about to erupt. Emma took a trembling step back. Her image froze on screen, mid-sentence, mid-smile, mid-collapse. One final clip cued itself. Ava, off-camera, years ago, in a grainy bass interview. Younger, rougher. I had forgotten that footage existed. "I didn't come here for thanks," my voice said in that quiet, raw way. "I just came to finish what I started." The screen went black. Silence for a beat. Then, applause. Not loud, not forced. Just a slow rising wave. One person stood, then 2, then 10, and I didn't need a podium. I had the truth. Within 24 hours, headlines changed, from Emma Carter honored to stolen valor. It spread faster than fire. Ava Carter, U.S. Army, donor, sister, erased. Emma Carter, corporate darling, public benefactor. Fraud? The live stream, once meant to crown a ceremony, had detonated something else entirely. By the time the sun rose, sponsors had already begun issuing statements. The Carter Veterans Fund is suspending its partnership pending review. We deeply respect those who serve. We regret any association with deceptive representations. One by one, logos vanished from the event homepage. The charity's official Instagram disabled comments, then quietly vanished altogether. Susan's face appeared next, not in celebration, but in breaking news banners. Real estate mogul under investigation for tax filings related to sponsorship fraud. Internal emails had been leaked. Ones she'd never thought anyone would read. Memos forwarding donation receipts to Emma's name. Requests to alter donor logs. Even a draft response to the IRS, never sent. The irony? It wasn't Ava who exposed the financial trail. It was the systems they themselves had built to protect their image. And then came the veterans. Clips appeared across social media, old interviews, current voices. "She took credit for our hospital wing," said one. "She didn't even know where it was." "She posed with my photo," said another, holding up a newspaper. "That photo was meant for Ava." No hate, just pain. Measured. Undeniable. Emma tried to speak. Late that evening, her publicist scheduled a live stream. 8 p.m. Emma would speak from the heart. She sat before a simple white backdrop, hair pulled back, voice trembling with controlled sincerity. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she said. "I believed I was honoring." But she hadn't reached her second sentence before the screen split. A veteran appeared. Gray-haired, decorated, calm. "Apology without repair," she said softly, "is just theater." The comment section flooded. "She's right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. Truth doesn't need makeup." Emma blinked hard. The feed froze. The video never resumed. Back in the small communications room where I watched it all, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply reached forward and turned the TV off. Ashby sat beside me, silent. I looked at her. "Now," I said, "it's time for the reconstruction." My story was no longer their burden. It became my own foundation. The house in Maryland creaked when I walked across the floor. Not from age, but from memory. It had once belonged to a retired Navy couple. They left behind old furniture, faded curtains, and a garage full of tools. I liked it that way. Nothing pretending to be more than it was. On the living room table sat a notebook. My handwriting, cramped and impatient, filled every page: draft bylaws, volunteer names, an outline for a site that credited the uncredited. At the top of the first page, Valor-built. Not in bold, just in pen. Ashby brought coffee that morning. She didn't ask how I slept. She just set down the cup and glanced at the stack of mail beside me. "2 speaking invites," she said. "One from CNN, one from a TED event." I didn't look up. "Decline both." She smirked. "Your brand could go big." "I'm not a brand," I said. "I'm just someone cleaning up after the show." Instead of interviews, we launched a basic website. Black text on white background. No filters. Just names. Donors. Builders. Veterans. All credited properly. Some had been anonymous by choice. Others, like me, had been made invisible. The site didn't go viral, but it reached the right inboxes. Within a week, 3 of my old teammates from Fort Liberty reached out. "Need help?" One of them brought nails. Another brought paint. The third brought nothing but time, and stayed longest. Monroe sent a letter by hand. On thick, cream-colored paper in tidy cursive, "Dear Ava, truth doesn't fix everything, but it clears the ground for better structures. I look forward to the one you build next. With respect, Monroe." I pinned it beside my desk. The first blog post I published was short. No graphics, just words. Some victories are silent, some are shared. This one is both. The comment section stayed open. Late one afternoon, a kid about 13 wandered past the porch. His father had been a Marine. He stopped, looking curious at the small wooden sign with the Valor-built logo burned into it. "You're Ava Carter?" he asked. I nodded. "I read your thing," he said, nodding toward the open laptop. I didn't know we could fight back like that. I smiled, not at the compliment, but at the truth he'd seen. "You always can," I told him. "Sometimes you just have to change the battlefield." He left without asking for a selfie or an autograph, just a wave. The sun dipped behind the trees. I turned on the porch light. A figure stood at the edge of the gravel path. Hands clenched, posture stiff. Familiar. Susan. My mother. She didn't speak. Neither did I. Not yet. "I didn't come for forgiveness," Susan said, her voice barely louder than the rain tapping on the porch roof. Just understanding what I destroyed? We sat in silence, two wooden chairs, yellow porch light casting shadows that stretched longer than the past itself. She looked smaller now, not older, just reduced. As if the years hadn't aged her, but the truth had carved her down to the core. I never asked you to understand me, I said after a while. But I hoped, once, that you'd at least not pretend I didn't exist. Susan gave a sad laugh. You were never invisible, Ava. You were just too bright, too defiant. I didn't know how to hold that without feeling like I was losing control. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She reached into the bag at her feet and pulled out a small wooden box, the kind my father used to store cufflinks and letters. She opened it slowly, carefully, like it might explode. Inside was a photograph, one I hadn't seen in years. I was in my academy uniform, standing between my father and grandmother. Susan stood off to the side, blurred and barely in frame, her hand on her hip, like she hadn't decided whether to join or leave. I kept it, she said, eyes on the photo. Even when I told you I'd thrown it away. You told me I was just a shadow, I reminded her. I know, she said, and I believed it. Because that made it easier to erase you. The wind shifted. Cold, but clean. I thought of my father's letter. Of the night I stood alone in Fort Liberty, watching the rain paint streaks on the window, wondering if I had anyone left in this world who remembered my name. Then I thought of what my grandmother once whispered the night before my first deployment. Strength, Ava, isn't about forgiving. It's about knowing when to stop hating. I looked at Susan. I don't hate you, I said. But I also don't owe you the rest of my life. Her mouth trembled slightly, but she nodded. Then this is enough, she said, placing the box on the porch table. Thank you for not shutting the door. She stood. I didn't stop her. When the sound of her footsteps faded into the gravel, I picked up the photo and held it under the porch light. I was still smiling in the picture. Not for them. For myself. For what I had chosen to become. Inside, I placed the photo on my desk beside Monroe's letter. Then I opened the laptop. New blog title. Witness, not revenge. Not because I hadn't felt the fire, but because I'd chosen not to burn in it. She came to erase a life, but walked away confronted by the one she could never rewrite. The truth didn't scream. It simply stood there, undeniable, wearing the uniform they tried to bury. Justice didn't come wrapped in applause, but in evidence, silence, and the courage to walk through fire without flinching. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Some reckonings aren't loud, they're steady, deliberate, and leave a mark no lie can undo. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. And comment 1 if you felt seen, or 2 if you wished for something more.